Shaquille O'Neal stepped into the private aviation terminal, instinctively ducking his head to avoid the doorway. He could already picture himself sinking into his seat, reclining, and finally unwinding after a long day. But just as he reached the security checkpoint, a firm voice cut through the air. "Sir, I need you to stop right there." Shaq turned, raising an eyebrow. In front of him stood a short, pale-skinned security guard with a rigid posture and a cold, unreadable expression. "This is a private flight," Shaq said, flashing his documents. "I own the damn plane." The guard barely glanced at the papers before crossing his arms. "I don't care who you are," he said, his voice like stone. "You're not getting through." Silence fell between them. A few passengers in the lounge turned their heads. Someone pulled out a phone. Shaq let out a slow breath, a smirk creeping onto his face. "Well," he muttered, rolling his shoulders. "This just got interesting." The tension between Shaq and the security guard thickened like storm clouds. The lounge had gone quiet, save for the occasional whisper and the hushed clicks of cameras recording. Shaq took a step closer, towering over the guard like a skyscraper casting a shadow. "Look, man. I don't know what this is about, but I'm not in the mood for games. My plane is right there." The guard didn't flinch. His hand hovered near his belt, where a taser and radio sat ready. "I said you're not going through," he repeated. A slow chuckle rumbled from Shaq's chest. "And why's that?" The guard exhaled sharply, as if annoyed by the question. "New security protocol. No exceptions." Shaq narrowed his eyes. "Funny. I've been through this airport a dozen times, and that rule never applied before. That was then. This is now." The way the guard said it made something in Shaq's gut twist. This wasn't just a routine check. It was personal. Behind them, more security personnel approached, their radios buzzing. A suited airport official stood by, observing but not yet intervening. Shaq looked around, seeing more and more phones pointed in their direction. The story was already spreading. With a deep breath, he turned back to the guard. His voice dropped, low and steady. "You really want to do this?" The guard's jaw clenched. "If you don't step back, I'll have to detain you." Shaq's nostrils flared. For a moment, it felt like the entire terminal was holding its breath. Then, he grinned. "All right," he said, raising his hands slightly. "Let's see how this plays out." The guard reached for his radio, but before he could speak, a new voice cut through the tension. "Enough." All eyes turned as a tall, well-dressed man strode toward them. His presence commanded respect. The airport official. And judging by his expression, things were about to escalate even further. The air in the terminal was thick with tension, the kind that turned casual onlookers into silent spectators. Shaq, standing over 7 feet tall, was used to being watched. But this was different. The security guard, Officer Reynolds, according to his badge, didn't just block his path. He planted himself there, like a human wall, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "I said," Reynolds repeated, voice flat, "you're not getting through." Shaq held up his hands, palms out. "Look, man. Let's not make this a thing. My plane's waiting." Reynolds didn't budge. The terminal speakers crackled overhead, announcing a flight boarding in a distant gate. People moved past them, but more and more stopped, sensing something about to boil over. Shaq exhaled sharply. He had been in plenty of fights on the court, elbows, shoves, full-body collisions under the rim. But this wasn't a game. This was something else. And Reynolds? Reynolds was looking at him like he wanted a fight. The tension was growing louder now. Passengers whispered. A few had their phones out, recording from a distance. A teenager nudged his friend. "Dude, that's Shaq." Another voice, an older man in a business suit, "They're really stopping him? Are they serious?" Shaq heard it all. And so did Reynolds. But instead of backing off, the guard straightened, his hand drifting toward his belt. Not to his gun, he wasn't that reckless. But to his taser. Shaq's eyes flicked to the movement. He wasn't going to let it escalate that way. You reach for that, he said, voice calm but heavy, and this whole thing changes. Reynolds' fingers hovered over the handle, tension crackling between them like static before a storm. A new voice cut in. Is there a problem here? The airport official had arrived, sharp suit, thinning hair, stress already settling in his expression. He wasn't happy to be here. Reynolds spoke first. This passenger is refusing to comply with a security hold. Shaq scoffed. Security hold? That's funny. You didn't even look at my ID. The official's lips pressed together. Sir, we need you to remain calm. Shaq's patience was thinning. I am calm, he said, his voice dropping an octave. But you need to explain why your guy is blocking me from my own damn plane. More cameras. More murmurs. Shaq could feel the moment shifting. It was turning into a story. Someone's phone rang nearby. A reporter, judging by the urgency in her voice as she answered. Yes, Shaquille O'Neal. Private terminal. Security conflict. A pause. No, I don't know why yet. Shaq barely contained his frustration. He wasn't here to make news, he was here to go home. The official noticed it too. His eyes darted around, seeing the recording phones. The situation wasn't containable anymore. So, he turned to Reynolds. What's the justification? Reynolds hesitated. Just for a second. But Shaq saw it. That hesitation meant one thing. He didn't have one. Shaq stepped in. Last chance, he said, low enough that only Reynolds and the official could hear. Let me through. Or tell me who gave the order. Reynolds didn't answer. Shaq exhaled through his nose, then shook his head. That's what I thought. Then, he turned, not to the security guard, not to the official, but to the watching crowd. And in one deep, controlled voice, he made sure they all heard it. Somebody tell me why I'm not allowed to board my own plane. The floodgates opened. A reporter rushed closer, microphone up. Mr. O'Neal, are you being detained? Another voice, is this racial profiling? A third, are you pressing charges? Shaq let the noise explode around him. Let the moment spiral. Because now it wasn't just his problem. Now it was everyone's. Reynolds' radio crackled. A sharp voice on the other end, stand down. Reynolds flinched. Then clenched his jaw, stepping aside. Shaq didn't move immediately. He studied Reynolds, seeing the flicker of frustration in the man's eyes. The guard had orders, but not from the people who just pulled him back. No. Somebody else had wanted this to happen. Somebody bigger. Shaq didn't say another word. Didn't gloat. Didn't rub it in. He just walked forward. And as he did, he heard the reporter behind him speak into the camera. Breaking news, Shaquille O'Neal just won a standoff at the airport. But the real question is, who ordered it? Shaq kept walking. Because he was about to find out. The airport official stepped between Shaq and the security guard, his polished dress shoes clicking against the marble floor. He adjusted his tie, his sharp eyes scanning the scene like a man who had seen too many problems land in his lap. Mr. O'Neal, he said, his tone calm but firm. Is there a problem here? Shaq crossed his arms. You tell me. Your guy here seems to think I'm some kind of security threat. The official shot a quick glance at the guard, who remained stone-faced. Officer Reynolds, what's the issue? Reynolds squared his shoulders. He doesn't have clearance to board. Shaq scoffed. That's bull. I own the damn plane. Do I need to show you the title? The official sighed, rubbing his temple. Shaq, I understand your frustration, but we've tightened security procedures. High-profile individuals require additional screening. Shaq's grin faded. Oh, so now I'm a high-profile risk? He took a step closer, his voice carrying weight. Or is there another reason your guy here decided I'm not getting on my own plane? The official hesitated. The question lingered in the air like an accusation. Then, from the side, a security guard's radio crackled. HQ to all units, media alert. Cameras rolling at Terminal 3. Keep all interactions by the book. Shaq's lips curled into a knowing smirk. Looks like you guys are on stage now. The official stiffened. He knew what that meant. This wasn't just about airport policy anymore, this was about optics. Reynolds, however, didn't flinch. I don't care who's watching, he said. Rules are rules. Shaq tilted his head, his amusement fading. Then you better be damn sure you're enforcing the right ones. A silence settled over the crowd. The official inhaled deeply, choosing his next words carefully. Then, just when it seemed like the situation might de-escalate, a loud voice rang out from the entrance. Shaq! What the hell is going on? Shaq turned, his eyes narrowing as he spotted a familiar face storming toward him. A man who had no business being at this airport. And suddenly, everything started making sense. The black SUV moved through the city like a ghost, its tinted windows shielding Shaq and Holt from the world outside. Inside, the air was thick with unspoken tension. Shaq sat back, his massive hands clenched into fists, his mind racing. The airport confrontation was over, but the war had just begun. Holt sat beside him, speaking rapidly into his phone. No. I don't care what the press is saying, find out who pulled the trigger on that security hold. I want names. And I want them now. Shaq stared out the window, watching the neon lights flicker against the glass. His reflection stared back, calm, collected, but beneath the surface? A storm was brewing. Because someone had just tried to take him off the board. And that someone had failed. Holt's phone buzzed. He glanced down, then cursed under his breath. Shaq turned his head slightly. Who is it? Holt hesitated. It's an old friend. And if he's calling now, it means we've got a real problem. He answered. Talk. A voice came through the speaker. You're in trouble. Shaq's jaw tightened. Yeah, no kidding. No. I mean real trouble, the voice clarified. That stunt at the airport? It wasn't just about stopping you from flying. Shaq narrowed his eyes. Then what was it about? The voice hesitated. You got enemies, O'Neill. The kind that don't just play the media game. They play the power game. And right now, you're standing in the wrong spot. Shaq exhaled slowly. Then tell me who put me there. The line was silent for a second. Then. The name you need is Alan Grayson. Holt sat up straighter. Grayson? Shaq didn't react immediately, but deep inside, something clicked. Alan Grayson. Billionaire. Ruthless corporate shark. A man with influence in every industry that mattered. And a man Shaq had turned down. Years ago. A deal that didn't go the way Grayson wanted. A handshake that never happened. And now? Now he was coming back. Holt cursed. What the hell does Grayson want with Shaq? The voice on the phone was grim. The better question is, what's he already done? Shaq's phone buzzed. A notification. Then another. Then another. He opened one. Breaking news, Shaquille O'Neal grounded in airport standoff. Another. Exclusive, why was Shaq held by security? Questions arise. Another. Conspiracy or control? Who stopped Shaquille O'Neal from flying? Shaq exhaled through his nose. It was exactly what he didn't want. A media circus. Speculation. Wild theories. And at the center of it? Him. Holt shook his head. Grayson's playing chess while we're playing checkers. He doesn't care about the security hold. He wanted this. Shaq understood now. The headlines weren't the endgame. They were the first move. Grayson wasn't trying to stop him from flying. Grayson was trying to control the narrative. The voice on the phone spoke again. Listen to me. Do not engage Grayson publicly. Not yet. Shaq frowned. Why? Because if you do, you'll be playing into his hands. Shaq clenched his jaw. He wasn't the type to sit back while someone took shots at him. But he wasn't stupid either. Holt rubbed his temple. We need to get ahead of this. Shaq exhaled. Then we start digging. Where? Shaq's gaze was cold. Wherever it hurts him most. Holt made another call. This time, it wasn't to a friend. It was to someone who owed them. When the line picked up, the voice on the other end was cautious. Do I even want to know why you're calling? Holt didn't waste time. We need everything on Alan Grayson. Business deals. Lawsuits. Shell companies. Everything. A sigh. That's a tall order. Shaq spoke for the first time. Then make it happen. Silence. Then, I'll send what I can. The line went dead. Holt looked at Shaq. You just put a target on your back. Shaq's lips curled into a half smile. Then let's make sure they see it. Another buzz. Another message. But this time, it wasn't news. It was from Grayson himself. We should talk. Let's not make this ugly. AG. Shaq stared at the words. The audacity. The arrogance. Holt exhaled sharply. He knows we're coming. Shaq smirked. Good. Holt raised an eyebrow. You planning on meeting him? Shaq leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Oh, I'm meeting him, he said. But he's not gonna like how I show up. Shaq turned toward the voice, his massive frame tensing. A man in a sleek navy blue suit stormed across the terminal, his face tight with frustration. James Holt. A high-powered sports agent. Not Shaq's, but a name well known in the industry, one who had a reputation for getting involved in things that weren't his business. Holt's polished dress shoes barely made a sound as he closed the distance. His expression flickered between urgency and annoyance. What the hell are you doing here? Shaq asked, his voice low. Holt didn't answer right away. He glanced at the security guard, then the airport official, then at the crowd, where dozens of people now had their phones up, recording every second of this confrontation. Then he turned back to Shaq, lowering his voice. You need to step away from this. Now. Shaq narrowed his eyes. Excuse me? Holt let out a tight breath. There's more going on here than you realize. You getting into it with airport security? That's exactly what someone wants. Shaq stiffened. A slow, creeping sense of suspicion crawled up his spine. What are you talking about? He asked. Holt glanced at the security guard, then leaned in slightly. There's a reason you're being stopped. Shaq's jaw clenched. Spit it out. Holt hesitated, then gave him a sharp look. Your name just got flagged on a no-fly list. For the first time, Shaq felt a genuine chill run down his spine. That's impossible, he said. I just flew in yesterday. I know. Holt's expression was grim. But someone with power wants you stuck here. And if you don't handle this the right way, they'll make sure you don't just miss your flight, they'll make sure you don't fly again. Silence. Even the security guard, still standing his ground, seemed to sense that the situation had shifted. Shaq's fingers curled into fists. Who? He demanded. Holt's jaw tightened. Not here, he said. We need to move. Now. Shaq exhaled, his mind racing. The security guards still hadn't budged, the cameras were still rolling, and now, It wasn't just a matter of an overzealous officer, it was something bigger. Something that had just become a whole lot more dangerous. The SUV rolled through the city, headlights slicing through the humid night air. Inside, Shaq sat motionless, his massive frame taking up most of the back seat. Holt was next to him, tapping furiously on his phone. The name Alan Grayson kept circling in Shaq's head. Grayson wasn't just rich. He wasn't just powerful. He was dangerous. And now, he had made a move. Shaq had faced off against 7-foot giants on the court. He had battled for championships, fought through injuries, silenced critics. But this was a whole new kind of game. A game where money, power, and perception mattered more than strength. And Grayson played to win. Holt's phone buzzed. He barely glanced at it before muttering, "No, no, no. This is bad." Shaq's eyes flicked toward him. "What?" Holt turned his screen. A name flashed across the caller ID. James Holt. Only one problem. James Holt was sitting right next to him. Shaq's stomach tightened. Someone was calling from Holt's number. Someone who shouldn't have access to it. Holt stared at the screen, hesitating. Then, slowly, he hit answer. Silence. Then, a voice came through. Low. Controlled. Unmistakably familiar. "You should have walked away, O'Neill." Shaq's skin prickled. It was him. Alan Grayson. Holt put the call on speaker. Shaq didn't react. Didn't speak. He just listened. Grayson's voice was smooth, like a man who had already won. "I'm disappointed, Shaq. I thought you were smarter than this." Shaq leaned forward slightly. "You've been watching me." Grayson let out a short chuckle. "Shaquille. I don't watch. I move pieces. And right now, you're on the wrong side of the board." Holt muttered under his breath, "Jesus." Shaq kept his voice even. "You put my name on a no-fly list." Grayson didn't deny it. "I gave you an opportunity to leave quietly. You chose otherwise." Shaq smirked. "And what? You thought I'd just sit down and take it?" A pause. "Then, I thought you'd recognize when a game is already over." Shaq's eyes darkened. "Funny. 'Cause from where I'm sitting? It's just getting started." Grayson's tone shifted. Colder. "Do you know what happens to people who don't play along?" Shaq clenched his fists. He had heard that tone before. Not on the court, not from an opponent. But from men who thought they were untouchable. Grayson continued, "I don't just control headlines, Shaq. I control futures. Careers. Legacies." Shaq exhaled slowly. "That's supposed to scare me?" Grayson's smirk was almost audible. "No. It's supposed to make you think." A click. The line went dead. Silence. Holt ran a hand through his hair. "We're in so much trouble." Shaq ignored him. His mind was already moving. He pulled out his own phone. Scrolled. Then tapped a contact labeled X. A few rings. Then, a voice. Digital. Scrambled. "A hacker. You finally calling me back, big guy?" Shaq didn't waste time. "I need everything on Alan Grayson." A whistle. "Damn. You don't ask for small favors, huh? Can you do it or not?" A pause. Then, "You're not the first person to ask about him." Shaq and Holt exchanged glances. Shaq leaned forward. "Who else?" Another pause. Then, "Someone who disappeared." The line clicked off. And just like that, Shaq knew. This wasn't just about him. The SUV rolled to a stop outside a high-rise building. Shaq didn't move immediately. He stared ahead, his thoughts racing. Holt shifted in his seat. You know what this means, right? Shaq nodded slowly. It means Grayson has enemies. And? Shaq's grip tightened on his phone. And I'm about to find them. Holt sighed, rubbing his temples. This is insane. Shaq turned his head slightly, his voice calm, steady, dangerous. You still in? Holt exhaled sharply. Then shook his head with a grin. Like I have a choice. As Shaq stepped out of the SUV, the city buzzed around him. He wasn't just a retired athlete tonight. He was a target. And now? He was hunting. Shaq's mind raced as he locked eyes with Holt. A no-fly list? That wasn't just an inconvenience, that was a move. A calculated one. He glanced back at the security guard, still standing rigid, hand near his belt, waiting for any excuse to escalate. The airport official looked tense, sweating under the weight of the situation. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, the glow of phone screens illuminating curious, hungry faces. Shaq exhaled slowly. He hated this. He wasn't the type to back down, especially when someone tried to corner him. But this wasn't just about him anymore. You expect me to just walk away from this? He asked, voice low. Holt shook his head. No. I expect you to be smart. They want you to react. They want a headline, Shaquille O'Neal detained in airport altercation. That sound good to you? Shaq clenched his jaw. He could already see the headlines. The late-night talk shows making jokes. The narratives twisting, turning him into something he wasn't. Holt took a small step closer. We don't fight this here. We get control first. I have people who can dig into this. But we have to leave, now. Shaq glanced at the guard again, then at the official, who still hadn't spoken. He could walk out. They'd let him. But that would mean letting whoever did this win, at least for now. He hated that more than anything. But he also knew Holt was right. Slowly, Shaq lifted his hands, not in surrender, but in a silent, deliberate show that he wasn't giving them what they wanted. He turned back to the official. I'll leave. But you better believe this isn't over. The official, looking visibly relieved, gave a quick nod. The guard still looked like he wanted a fight, but Shaq didn't give him one. Instead, he turned and walked, Holt by his side. As they moved through the terminal, the whispers followed. The cameras followed. And somewhere, someone who had orchestrated this was watching, waiting for his next move. Shaq wasn't going to let them wait long. Shaq wasn't used to being watched. He was used to being seen. Being a giant made that unavoidable. People turned their heads when he walked into a room, kids pointed, fans whispered, cameras clicked. But this was different. This wasn't admiration. This was surveillance. As he and Holt stepped out of the SUV and into the dimly lit streets, Shaq felt it immediately. Eyes. Watching. Tracking. Calculating. Someone was waiting for him to make the wrong move. And he had no intention of giving them what they wanted. Holt had noticed it too. Behind us, he murmured, barely moving his lips. White sedan. Been at every stoplight with us since we left the hotel. Shaq didn't turn his head, didn't react. How many people inside? 2. Maybe 3. Holt exhaled. Definitely not fans. Shaq smirked. They want us nervous. They're succeeding. Shaq chuckled low. Nah. He wasn't nervous. He was interested. Because whoever was watching wasn't just some random security firm. They were Grayson's people. And if they were this eager to keep tabs on him, that meant he was getting too close to something. Which meant it was time to push harder. Shaq kept walking. Slow. Purposeful. Then, without warning, he stopped. Holt nearly bumped into him. What the? Shaq turned fully around. And locked eyes with the men in the white sedan. Even from across the street, he saw it, the flicker of hesitation. They weren't expecting him to confront them. Shaq smiled. Big. Bold. Unshaken. Then he raised a hand. And waved. The driver stiffened. Holt exhaled. You really just waved at them? Shaq didn't look away. Yeah. What's the play here? Shaq's grin faded. We make them move first. The men in the sedan sat frozen. Then, the car peeled off. Shaq's smirk returned. That's what I thought. Holt watched as the taillights disappeared down a side street. Okay. That was either really smart or really stupid. Shaq shrugged. If they had the upper hand, they wouldn't have run. Holt shook his head. So what now? Shaq checked his phone. We find out why Grayson is so afraid of us getting answers. And that meant it was time to start digging into the one name Grayson didn't want them to find. The person who disappeared. Back in the SUV, Holt made the call. The hacker answered after one ring. You again, the scrambled voice muttered. You like dancing with fire, huh? Shaq didn't waste time. You said someone else was looking into Grayson before us. A pause. Then, yeah. Who? Another pause. Then, quietly, Michael Carr. Holt frowned. Never heard of him. Shaq had. Because Michael Carr was an investigative journalist. And 2 years ago, he vanished. No trace. No body. Just, gone. Shaq's chest tightened. Where was he last seen? The hacker sighed. That's the part you're not gonna like. A pause. Then. At an event hosted by Apex Dynamics. Grayson's company. The same company that flagged Shaq's name. Everything snapped into place. This wasn't just about keeping Shaq off a plane. This was about erasing people. Holt looked uneasy. This is too big, Shaq. This isn't just a business rivalry, this is something else. Shaq exhaled. Yeah. Apex Dynamics. Grayson. A journalist who got too close. It all pointed to one thing. Shaq wasn't supposed to be here. Grayson had expected him to back down after the airport stunt. Maybe get angry, maybe go to the press, but not start digging. Which meant he wasn't prepared for what came next. Shaq checked his phone. A new message sat on the screen. It was from an unknown number. You need to stop. Shaq showed Holt. What do you think? Holt groaned. I think this is where normal people walk away. Shaq pocketed his phone. Good thing I'm not normal. The SUV pulled up to a small, rundown bar on the edge of town. The kind of place where people didn't ask questions. Inside, a man sat at a corner booth. Nervous. Checking the door every few seconds. Shaq and Holt approached. The man flinched. Jesus. You weren't supposed to come. Shaq slid into the booth. You're the one who texted. The man swallowed. I shouldn't even be talking to you. Shaq leaned in. Then why are you? The man hesitated. Then whispered, because I know what happened to Michael Carr. Holt stiffened. Shaq kept his expression unreadable. Tell me. The man's hands shook. His eyes darted to the door. I can't. Not here. Shaq's stomach tightened. Because if this guy was this scared, then whatever he knew was worth killing for. Shaq and Holt moved quickly through the airport's side exit, slipping into a black SUV that had been waiting by the curb. The moment the doors shut, the energy inside shifted. Shaq leaned back, exhaling sharply. Talk. Holt adjusted his tie, pulling out his phone. First off, don't do anything stupid. Shaq's eyes narrowed. You think I'm the one playing games here? No, Holt admitted. But the people behind this are. And they're betting on you reacting exactly how they want. Shaq crossed his arms. Then tell me who they are. Holt hesitated, glancing at his phone screen. He swiped, then turned it toward Shaq. A news article was already live. Shaquille O'Neal stopped by airport security, details unclear. Beneath it, a blurry photo showed Shaq and the security guard in their tense standoff. Shaq scoffed. They didn't waste time. Because this was never just about stopping you from flying, Holt said, locking his phone. It's about perception. Someone's trying to control your image. Shaq's jaw tightened. He'd dealt with bad press before, every celebrity had. But this was different. This wasn't just some viral clip taken out of context. This was an orchestrated move, meant to put him in a specific light. But why? Holt was already dialing a number. He didn't ask for permission. He just acted. Yeah, it's me, he said the moment the line connected. Tell me what you found. Shaq listened as the voice on the other end spoke fast, too low for him to hear clearly. Holt's expression darkened. Then, after a few seconds, he cursed under his breath and hung up. We've got a problem. Shaq exhaled through his nose. No kidding. No, I mean a bigger problem, Holt clarified. Your name wasn't just flagged at the airport. You're being investigated. Shaq's head snapped toward him. Investigated for what? Holt shook his head. That's what we need to find out. But someone wants your name dragged through the mud, and they've already set things in motion. Silence. Then, Holt looked at Shaq, his voice lowering. This isn't just about stopping you from flying, big man. This is about stopping you, period. Shaq's fingers curled into fists. He'd been in a lot of fights before. But this? This was something else. And whoever had started it had no idea what they'd just woken up. Shaq could feel the fear radiating off the man in the booth. He was sweating despite the cold air, his fingers twitching against the rim of his untouched glass. His eyes flicked toward the door every few seconds, scanning for something or someone. Shaq had seen fear before. He had seen it in opponents who knew they were outmatched, in rookies stepping onto the court for the first time. But this? This was different. This was the fear of a man who knew he wasn't supposed to be alive. Holt sat beside Shaq, arms crossed, scanning the room like he expected someone to storm in at any moment. The informant's voice came out shaky. I don't have long. Shaq leaned in. Then started talking. The man's name was Ethan Cross. A former investigative assistant who once worked under Michael Carr. And now he was a ghost. No credit cards, no apartment lease, no online presence. He had erased himself. Or at least, he had tried. Cross exhaled sharply. 2 years ago, Michael was digging into Apex Dynamics. Not their public business, not the tech they sell, but the back channels. The money that moved in and out of companies that didn't officially exist. Holt's eyes narrowed. Shell corporations? Cross nodded. More than that. Fronts. Laundering for people who don't want to be traced. Shaq's fingers tapped against the table. Who? Cross hesitated. I don't know all of them. But one name kept showing up. Shaq waited. Cross licked his lips, then whispered. A man named Victor Dane. Silence. Holt leaned forward. Who the hell is Victor Dane? Cross exhaled. The real owner of Apex Dynamics. Shaq frowned. That's not right. Grayson owns Apex. Cross shook his head. Grayson is the face. The puppet. Dane is the one moving the money, calling the shots. Apex Dynamics is just one piece of his empire. Holt cursed under his breath. Why hasn't anyone exposed this? Cross let out a bitter laugh. Because everyone who tries ends up missing. Shaq's stomach twisted. Like Michael. Cross nodded. A beat of silence passed. Then Cross swallowed hard and leaned in even closer. Michael found something. Something big. The kind of thing that got him killed. Shaq's jaw clenched. What was it? Cross's voice dropped to a whisper. Proof that Apex isn't just laundering money. Holt blinked. Then what the hell are they doing? Cross hesitated. Then, in the quietest voice possible, he said, They're funding Black Ops. Holt sat back like he had been punched in the gut. Shaq, however, didn't move. He had felt it coming. The way everything kept escalating, kept twisting into something darker, something bigger than himself. But hearing the words come out of someone's mouth? That changed things. Shaq's voice was dangerously quiet. What kind of Black Ops? Cross's fingers tightened around his glass. Off-the-record missions. Hits on journalists, whistleblowers, people who get too close. Shaq's pulse pounded. Like Michael. Cross gave a slow, haunted nod. Like Michael. Cross looked over his shoulder again. This time, his face changed. Something spooked him. Shaq's instincts fired instantly. What is it? Cross's breathing hitched. They found me. Shaq followed his gaze toward the bar's entrance. A black SUV had pulled up outside. Tinted windows. No plates. And 3 men in suits were getting out. Holt muttered, Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Cross shot up. I need to go. Shaq grabbed his wrist. You run, you're dead. Cross's chest rose and fell rapidly. Then what the hell do I do? Shaq's grip tightened. You stick with me. The 3 men entered the bar. Their eyes swept the room. They were professionals. Looking for one thing. Cross. Holt's voice was tight. They'll make a move in less than a minute. Shaq's brain moved at lightning speed. Options. Exits. Distractions. Then, he saw it. A back hallway. A door labeled staff only. Shaq made the decision in an instant. He stood up. The men locked onto him. Shaq smiled. Y'all looking for me? All 3 men paused. One, the apparent leader, narrowed his eyes. This isn't your business, O'Neill. Shaq grinned wider. Then why do you look so nervous? The man tensed. And in that split second, Holt grabbed Cross by the collar and yanked him toward the back exit. Shaq moved at the same time, stepping between them and the hit squad. The leader's eyes flicked behind Shaq. He realized too late. Cross was gone. Shaq chuckled. Oops. Then the first punch came. Shaq barely saw it coming. A professional strike aimed at his ribs. But Shaq wasn't a normal man. He moved fast. Blocked. Countered. His fist connected with the attacker's chest, sending him crashing into a table. The second guy lunged. Shaq grabbed a chair and swung it hard. Wood splintered, the man dropped. The third guy hesitated. Shaq cracked his knuckles. Try it. The man ran. Shaq smirked. Smart choice. Holt and Cross were already in the SUV when Shaq jogged out of the alleyway. Cross was shaking. Holt was pissed. Do you always have to start fights with private hit squads? Shaq grinned. Only when they deserve it. Then he turned to Cross. You still scared? Cross nodded. Shaq's smile faded. Good. Because now he was scared too. The SUV cut through the city streets, moving fast but controlled. Inside, Shaq sat still, his massive frame barely fitting in the seat, fists clenched against his knees. His mind was running hot. Holt kept his phone on speaker as he dialed another number. This time, the voice on the other end was clearer. I found something. But you're not gonna like it. Shaq leaned in. Then just say it. The voice hesitated. Then, your name got flagged by a private firm. Not the government, not TSA. This was done through a security contractor. Holt's brows furrowed. Who? The voice hesitated again. Ever heard of Redwater Global? Silence. Shaq exhaled sharply. He had heard of them. A private intelligence and security firm with deep corporate and political connections. They weren't the type of people you ran into by accident. Holt's expression darkened. That's not random. No, it's not, the voice on the phone confirmed. Someone with serious power paid to have Shaq flagged. And if Redwater's involved, this isn't just about bad PR. Shaq leaned back against the seat, staring out the window. His mind turned over the facts, clicking them into place like pieces of a puzzle. Redwater Global didn't handle minor issues. They were hired to eliminate threats. And someone had just classified him as one. Holt rubbed his temple. We need to find out who pulled the trigger on this. Shaq's voice was steady. Where do we start? The voice on the phone sighed. I traced the order. It came from an account linked to an executive at Apex Dynamics. Holt's head snapped up. Apex Dynamics? As in the tech firm? Yeah. Shaq narrowed his eyes. He didn't have beef with any tech company. At least, not that he knew of. But the moment the name was said, his instincts flared. Apex was $1 billion corporation. If they were playing this kind of game, it wasn't for something small. Holt leaned forward. Who's the exec? The voice hesitated. Alan Grayson. Shaq didn't react immediately. But something about that name felt wrong. Holt blinked. Wait, the same Alan Grayson that... Shaq's jaw tightened. Yeah. Alan Grayson. A ruthless corporate mogul known for his aggressive acquisitions, and a man who, years ago, had once sat across from Shaq at a business negotiation. A deal that Shaq turned down. Now, it seemed, Grayson hadn't forgotten. Shaq exhaled slowly. His eyes locked onto Holt's. Where is he? Holt's phone pinged with an incoming message. He checked it, then looked back up. He's here. Shaq frowned. Here? In the city, Holt clarified. Hosting an event tomorrow night. Shaq's fingers drummed against the door handle. Tomorrow night. So, whoever was behind this wasn't finished yet. Good. Because neither was he. The gala was high profile. The kind of event where billionaires clinked glasses and whispered deals worth more money than most people would see in a lifetime. Shaq didn't have a ticket. Didn't need one. The moment he stepped out of the SUV, the doorman tensed. Eyes widened. They recognized him. But no one stopped him. Dressed in a sharp, all-black suit, Shaq moved through the grand entrance like a tank rolling through a garden party. Holt trailed behind, murmuring into his phone, but Shaq wasn't listening anymore. His target was in sight. Alan Grayson stood near the bar, laughing with a group of executives, a drink in his hand, his posture relaxed. He hadn't seen Shaq yet. Good. Shaq walked straight toward him. The room wasn't loud enough to mask the sound of his footsteps, deep, heavy, deliberate. And then Grayson turned. The smile on his face froze, just for a second. His grip on his drink tightened. He recovered quickly, flashing a forced smirk. Shaquille. He raised his glass. Didn't expect to see you here. Shaq stopped just feet away. His voice was calm, controlled. Didn't need an invitation. A ripple of tension passed through the small crowd. The other executives exchanged glances, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Grayson, however, chuckled, feigning amusement. You always did have a way of making an entrance. Shaq didn't smile. You always did have a way of making enemies. The smirk on Grayson's face twitched. Enemies? Come on. That's a strong word. Shaq took another step forward, now towering over the billionaire. Then tell me why my name is on a no-fly list. Why a private intelligence firm is tracking me. Why my face is all over the media with a story you probably helped write. For the first time, a crack in Grayson's cool demeanor. But only for a second. He swirled the drink in his glass, playing it off. You think I had something to do with that? Shaq didn't blink. I know you did. Silence. Around them, the party continued, but the people closest were no longer laughing. No longer talking. Just watching. Grayson exhaled, setting his drink down on the bar. You always were a smart man. But let me give you some free advice. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. You're playing a game you can't win. Shaq's eyes darkened. That's so? Grayson smirked. You're a legend, O'Neill. People love you. But they also love a fall. He took a sip of his drink, savoring the moment. And right now, you're standing at the edge. Shaq clenched his jaw. He'd been in fights before. Championships, playoffs, brawls under the rim. But this was different. This was war. And Grayson had just made his first move. Shaq leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. Enjoy the party. Then he turned and walked away. He wasn't done. Not even close.